I was standing in front of the mirror in my wedding dress when my phone buzzed. 2 hours before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. The text from Mom read, "Don't expect anyone to show." My hands shook as I opened Instagram. There it was. A group photo on a pristine Maui beach. My entire family. Mom, Dad, both siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins. Champagne glasses raised, tanned skin glowing. The caption, "Finally together." In another photo, my wedding invitation sat in the background, propped against a tiki torch. They were using it as a joke. I stood there frozen, my fingers gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. The bridal suite at Rosewood Estate felt suddenly too small, the walls closing in. My wedding dress, this beautiful ivory gown with delicate lace sleeves that I had spent months finding, suddenly felt like a costume for a play nobody wanted to attend. Julie burst through the door, her bridesmaid dress swishing around her knees. She took one look at my face and rushed over. "Carla, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I just handed her my phone. I watched her face change as she scrolled through the photos. Her mouth fell open. Her eyes got wider with each swipe. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, Carla. They're all in Hawaii? Today? On your wedding day?" I nodded, my throat too tight to form words. There were at least 20 people in those photos. My mother Linda in a flowing white resort dress. My father Richard in expensive board shorts and a linen shirt. My brother Justin with his arm around some blonde I'd never seen before. My sister Amanda, looking perfect as always in a designer bikini. Aunts, uncles, cousins I'd grown up with. Every single person I'd invited from my side of the family. "Maybe there's an explanation," Julie said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe it's an old photo?" I shook my head and showed her the timestamp. Posted 43 minutes ago. I showed her the geotag. Grandwalia Resort, Maui. I showed her the comments already rolling in. Friends and extended family members commenting with palm tree emojis and so jealous messages. Nobody seemed to think it was strange that this was happening on my wedding day. Or maybe they did know, and that was the point. A knock on the door made us both jump. It was Sandra, the wedding coordinator, her clipboard clutched to her chest and worry lines creasing her forehead. "Carla, honey, we have a situation. Only about 50 guests have arrived, and they're all from the groom's side. Should I delay the start time?" I looked at the clock. 1 hour and 17 minutes until I was supposed to walk down that aisle. 150 invitations sent. 75 on my side, 75 on Tyler's. Only Tyler's family had shown up. My side was completely empty. No, not empty. They were there, just not here. They were 3,000 miles away on a beach, toasting my absence. "Give me a minute," I managed to say. Sandra nodded and slipped out, closing the door softly behind her. Julie grabbed my hands. "Okay, listen to me. You can still do this. Tyler loves you. His family is here. We're here. Your real friends are here. Those people out there in Hawaii? They don't deserve you. They never have." She was right about one thing. My 3 closest friends from college were here, dressed in their bridesmaid dresses, waiting in the hall. They were my real family. But Tyler was supposed to be my partner, my future, the person who would stand by me when everyone else abandoned me. I needed to see him. I needed him to hold me and tell me it would be okay, and that we would get married anyway and build our own family, away from the toxicity of mine. I found Tyler in the groom's suite, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. He looked so handsome in his tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled. When he saw my face, his expression changed. "Carla? What's wrong?" I showed him the phone. I watched him scroll through the photos just like Julie had done, but his reaction was different. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed. He handed the phone back to me and wouldn't meet my gaze. "Tyler?" He ran his hand through his hair, messing up the perfect styling. "This is bad, Carla. I know it's bad. They abandoned me. But we can still get married. We can still have our day." He turned away from me, staring out the window at the gardens where our ceremony was supposed to happen. The white chairs arranged in perfect rows. The flower arch I'd spent hours designing with the florist. The string quartet warming up near the gazebo. "Maybe we should postpone," he said quietly. My heart stopped. "What? This is a bad sign. I mean, if your own family won't come to your wedding," he trailed off. "My family is toxic. You know that. We've talked about this. You said you understood." "I do understand. I just..." He finally turned to look at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Doubt. I've been having second thoughts, Carla. My parents have been talking to me about your family situation, about the drama with the company, about whether it's wise to marry into all of this. I felt like I'd been slapped. The drama with the company? Tyler, you know what my grandfather left me. You know why my family resents me. This isn't my fault. I know. I'm just saying maybe we should take some time. Let things cool down. This whole situation with your family. He gestured at my phone. It's just proving that there are issues we need to work through. We can work through them together. That's what marriage is. He shook his head slowly. I need time to think. I can't do this today. Not like this. The world tilted sideways. You're leaving me? Right now? An hour before our wedding? I'm not leaving you. I just need time. But he was leaving. I could see it in the way he was already moving toward the door, already looking for his escape. The man I'd spent 4 years with, the man I'd planned a future with, couldn't even stand by me for one day. Tyler, please. He stopped at the door but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, Carla. I really am. But I can't do this. And then he was gone. I stood there in my wedding dress in the empty groom's suite, listening to the sounds of confusion rising from the venue below. Voices calling for Tyler. Footsteps rushing. His groomsmen looking for him. His parents making excuses. Julie found me 10 minutes later. By then, Tyler's family was filing out of the venue, embarrassed but clearly relieved. The wedding was off. The ceremony that had cost me $75,000 of my own money. The venue I'd booked a year in advance. The flowers and food and music and photographer. All of it wasted. Julie held me while I cried, my makeup running down my face, leaving dark streaks on the ivory lace of my dress. My other friends gathered around us, forming a protective circle. But nothing could protect me from the truth. I'd lost my family and my fiancé in the same day. I'd been abandoned by everyone who was supposed to love me. We sat in the empty venue after everyone had left. The tables were still set with their elegant centerpieces, candles flickering in glass holders, white roses filling the air with their scent. Food was being packed up by catering staff who kept their eyes down, uncomfortable witnesses to my humiliation. Julie had brought me a bottle of wine from the bar, and we sat there in our fancy dresses drinking straight from the bottle like we were back in college. I don't understand, Julie said for the 10th time. Why would they do this? What happened to make them hate you so much? I took a long drink and felt the wine burn down my throat. The story was complicated, but Julie deserved to know. She'd been my best friend since freshman year at Cornell. She'd seen me work myself to exhaustion getting my MBA while everyone else partied. She'd been there when my grandfather died. She knew pieces of the story, but not all of it. It's about the company, I said. Hartford Property Group. Julie nodded. She knew my family owned it. She'd been to the offices, seen the buildings we'd developed across Connecticut. My grandfather started it 40 years ago. Built it from nothing. He was a construction worker who saved every penny, took risks, worked himself half to death. By the time I was born, it was worth millions. Commercial real estate development, strip malls, office buildings, mixed-use properties. I remember you talking about him. You loved him. He was the only one in my family who saw me. Really saw me. I took another drink. When he died 3 years ago, everyone expected him to leave the company equally divided. Or maybe give controlling interest to my father, since he's the oldest. But he didn't. He left it to you. 51% controlling interest. To me. His granddaughter who'd worked 80-hour weeks for 7 years building the business. Who had ideas and vision and actually cared about the company beyond just cashing checks. Julie's eyes widened. How much is the other 49% worth? My dad has 20%. My mom has 10%. Justin and Amanda each have 9.5%. At current valuation, the company is worth about $30 million. My 51% is worth about $15 million. Maybe more. Holy hell, Carla. My grandfather knew what he was doing. He knew Justin was a spoiled trust fund kid who crashed cars and blew money on stupid investments. He knew Amanda didn't care about anything except her Instagram following and marrying rich. He knew my parents had enabled them their whole lives. And he knew I was the only one who actually worked for it. I pulled out my phone and pulled up photos from 3 years ago, my grandfather's will reading, the looks on everyone's faces when the attorney announced the ownership split, my father's red face, my mother's tears. Justin actually threw a crystal paperweight across the attorney's office. They contested the will, I continued. Spent a year in court fighting me. Said he was mentally incompetent when he wrote it. Said I'd manipulated him. They lost. The will was ironclad. So I became CEO at 25 years old. And they've resented you ever since. Resented doesn't begin to cover it. They've tried to undermine me at every turn. Vote against my proposals in board meetings. Spread rumors to our investors. My father told our biggest client that I was in over my head, and they should work with him directly instead. I've had to fight for every single decision. Julie shook her head in disgust. But why the Maui trip? Why today? Because they want me to quit. If I resign as CEO and give up my controlling interest, it reverts to the board. Which means them. They'd have control. They could vote themselves huge salaries, drain the company dry, sell it off for parts, whatever they want. But you're not going to quit. No. I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest where my heart used to be. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to fight back. I pulled out my laptop from my bag. Yes, I'd brought my laptop to my wedding venue. Because I was always working, always thinking about the company, always one step ahead. It was probably part of why Tyler left. He'd complained about it. Said I cared more about the business than him. Maybe he was right. Julie watched as I logged into the corporate accounts. My fingers flew across the keyboard, years of financial management making the process automatic. What are you doing? My father has been living off company expense accounts for 3 years. Corporate credit card for everything. Meals, travel, his car lease. Justin, too. They treat it like their personal piggy bank. I've let it slide, because fighting every charge wasn't worth the energy. I pulled up the signatory authorizations. My father's name was on every account. I clicked delete. 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 His access vanished with each click. I'm removing him as an authorized user. And I'm freezing the corporate credit cards. Can you do that? I'm the CEO and majority owner. I can do whatever I want. Next, I pulled up the property development files. There was a new luxury condo project we'd been planning in downtown Hartford. High-end units, river views, boutique retail on the ground floor. My father had been pushing for it because the development plan included giving each board member a unit. A $2 million condo for him and Mom. Units for Justin and Amanda. I opened the charter agreement and found my electronic signature authorization. I pulled my name off the project. Without my approval as majority owner, the project couldn't move forward. The condos they'd been planning to move into vanished with a few keystrokes. Carla, Julie said carefully, are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I kept going. Corporate car leases. My father drove a Mercedes S-Class on the company dime. $1,200 a month. Justin had a Range Rover. $1,500 a month. I canceled both leases, effective immediately. The leasing company would be contacting them Monday morning to return the vehicles. By midnight, I'd systematically cut them off from every perk they'd been enjoying. The corporate apartment in Manhattan my mother used for shopping trips, gone. The country club membership they barely used, but cost the company $20,000 a year, canceled. The business class flights they booked for personal vacations, charged to company accounts, no more. Julie watched me work, occasionally refilling my wine glass. I was still in my wedding dress, makeup smeared down my face, veil discarded on the floor, but my hands were steady. My mind was clear. When I finally closed the laptop, I felt lighter than I had in hours. Maybe lighter than I had in years. I sent my mom a text earlier, I said. Just 2 words. Perfect timing. Julie raised her wine glass. To perfect timing. We clinked the bottle against her glass. Outside the windows, the sun had set. The beautiful June day I'd planned for my wedding was over, but something new was beginning. 1 week later, I was standing in my condo in downtown Hartford, making coffee in my yoga pants and an old Cornell t-shirt. I'd bought this place 2 years ago with my own money, separate from the family business. 22nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Connecticut River. Hardwood floors, modern kitchen, a sanctuary away from all of them. The pounding on my door started at 7 in the morning on Saturday. I knew who it was before I looked through the peephole. My father's face was red and furious, his fist hammering on the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I took my time. Made my coffee just right, extra cream, 1 sugar, stirred it slowly, let him pound. When I finally opened the door, I was perfectly calm, coffee mug in hand, taking a slow sip. Good morning, Dad. He pushed past me into the condo, not waiting for an invitation. What the hell do you think you're doing? Drinking coffee. Want some? Don't play games with me, Carla. His voice was loud enough that my neighbors probably heard every word. The credit cards, the cars, the condo development. Do you have any idea what you've done? I closed the door and leaned against it, still cradling my coffee. I made some business decisions. As CEO, which is my job. Business decisions? You froze our accounts. Mercedes came and towed my car from the driveway. Your mother's credit card was declined at Nordstrom. Justin called me from the Range Rover dealership, furious. This is not business. This is revenge. Is it revenge to expect board members to not use company funds for personal expenses? That seems like basic corporate governance to me. His face got even redder. A vein throbbed in his forehead. For a moment, I wondered if he might have a stroke right there in my living room. You're out of control. This is exactly the kind of erratic behavior we've been worried about. We? Who's we? The board, your mother and I, Justin, Amanda. We're all concerned about your mental state, Carla. This wedding disaster, and now this vindictive tantrum. It's not normal. I took another sip of coffee. Savored it. You missed my wedding to take a vacation. I made adjustments to company spending. Those two things seem logically connected to me. That vacation was planned months ago. It was my 60th birthday celebration. Your birthday is in October, Dad. It's June. He faltered for just a second, then recovered. Early celebration. The point is, you're not thinking clearly. You're making emotional decisions that hurt the company. The company is fine. Revenue is up 12% this quarter. We just signed 2 new development contracts. The only thing I hurt was your lifestyle. You can't do this, Carla. The board won't allow it. The board can't stop me. I have 51%. You know how voting works, right? I learned it in business school. Maybe you should try taking a class. That was a low blow, and I knew it. My father had never finished college. Grandfather had pulled him into the business when he was 20 and he'd never gone back. It was one of his sore spots. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. You think you're so smart. You think your business degree makes you better than us. But you're going to learn something very soon, little girl. What's that? That family is more important than money. And you just declared war on your family. No, Dad. You declared war on me when you chose a beach vacation over my wedding day. I'm just returning fire. He stared at me for a long moment. Then his expression changed. The rage smoothed out, replaced by something colder, more calculated. He actually smiled. We'll see about that, he said quietly. Then he turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind him. Somehow, that calm exit was more frightening than all the yelling had been. I stood there for a while, coffee cooling in my hands, staring at the closed door. Something about that smile bothered me. That confidence. My phone buzzed. An email. I almost ignored it, but the sender name caught my eye. Peter Whitmore, the company's corporate attorney, a man who'd worked for my grandfather for 20 years. A man I thought was loyal. The email had no subject line. Just an attachment. A PDF. My hands started shaking as I opened it. It was a legal complaint. Filed in Hartford Superior Court. The plaintiffs? Richard, Linda, Justin, and Amanda Hartford. The defendant, me. The cause of action. Petition for emergency conservatorship and removal of corporate officer. I read through the filing, my coffee forgotten, my heart pounding louder with each page. They were claiming I was mentally unfit to run the company. The evidence they cited made my stomach turn. The wedding day breakdown, they called it. Emotional instability, erratic behavior, vindictive decision-making that harmed the company. They had statements from Tyler about my emotional volatility and paranoid accusations. They had a psychiatrist willing to testify about personality disorders and stress-induced breakdowns. But the worst part, the part that made me actually gasp out loud, was the law firm representing them. Brennan, Woods, and Associates. Tyler's firm. Tyler wasn't just leaving me. He was actively working against me. He'd known about this lawsuit before the wedding. That's why he'd walked away. He was already on their side. I scrolled through the rest of the document with numb fingers. They wanted a judge to appoint a conservator to oversee my decision-making. They wanted to freeze my authority as CEO pending a full competency evaluation. They wanted me examined by court-appointed psychiatrists. They wanted access to my medical records, my personal communications, everything. And they'd already scheduled a preliminary hearing. 3 days from now. I forwarded the email to Julie with shaking hands. Then I collapsed on my couch and let myself cry for the second time in a week. not the heartbroken tears from the wedding day. These were tears of rage and betrayal and fear. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure I could win. The attorney I hired was named Sharon Brooks. She came highly recommended from a colleague at Cornell, a woman who'd fought her own corporate family battle and won. Sharon was in her mid-50s, with sharp gray eyes and an even sharper suit. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "This is bad," she said, sitting across from me in her Boston office 2 days before the hearing. "They've built a surprisingly strong case. But it's all lies. I'm not mentally unstable. I made rational business decisions, rational to you. But they're painting a picture of emotional instability and vindictive behavior. The wedding cancellation is powerful optics. Woman left at the altar, family abandons her, and then she immediately retaliates by freezing accounts. That narrative plays well." I wanted to scream. They went to Hawaii on my wedding day. They sabotaged my wedding deliberately. We'll argue that. But they have emails showing the Maui trip was planned months in advance for your father's birthday. They claim they tried to tell you about the scheduling conflict, but you wouldn't listen. That's a complete fabrication. Can you prove it? Do you have any emails or texts where you discussed the wedding date with them? I thought back through months of wedding planning. My family had been distant during all of it. Barely responded to my messages about the date, the venue, the guest list. I'd assumed they were just being difficult as usual. Now I realized they'd been setting me up. "No," I admitted. "They mostly ignored my messages." Sharon nodded grimly. "That's going to be a problem. And there's something else we need to discuss. The court is going to order a psychiatric evaluation. It's standard in these cases." "What?" "No, I'm not crazy. I know that. But you have to do it. If you refuse, it looks like you have something to hide. The evaluation will be conducted by a court-appointed psychiatrist. You'll answer questions about your mental health history, your stress levels, your decision-making process. How is this even legal? When someone petitions for conservatorship, the court has to determine if there's a legitimate concern. It's meant to protect people who genuinely can't care for themselves. But it can be weaponized. And your family is doing exactly that." The evaluation took place the next day in a sterile office building. The psychiatrist was a man in his 60s named Dr. Reynolds. He asked me questions for 3 hours. About my childhood, my relationships, my work habits, my sleep patterns, my anxiety levels. He asked about the wedding day over and over. How did I feel when I saw the photos? What was my emotional state? Did I consider that my actions afterward might have been impulsive? I tried to stay calm and rational, tried to explain that freezing the accounts was a business decision, not an emotional reaction. But I could hear how it sounded. Woman scorned, lashing out at her family. The narrative was already written. The preliminary hearing happened in Hartford Superior Court on a Wednesday morning. I wore my best business suit, pulled my hair back, tried to look as professional and competent as possible. My family showed up looking like they'd stepped out of a Pottery Barn catalog, conservative, concerned, respectable. My mother actually cried on the witness stand. "We're just so worried about her," Linda said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "She's always been intense, always pushed herself so hard. But since my father's death, she's been different, more isolated, more paranoid. And then when Tyler broke off the engagement, something just broke inside her. I watched the judge watch her. He was a man in his 50s named Judge Morrison. He nodded sympathetically as my mother spoke. My father testified about my erratic business decisions. How I'd fired the company's longtime controller without cause. How I'd vetoed profitable development projects. How I refused to listen to the board's advice. All lies, or at least distortions of the truth. But he sounded so reasonable, so concerned. Tyler testified. That was the worst part. Watching him sit in that witness stand in his expensive suit, lying under oath about our relationship. She became increasingly paranoid over the past year, he said. Always accusing her family of being against her. She'd work 14, 16-hour days, barely sleep. I'd try to get her to take a break, but she'd snap at me. Accuse me of not understanding. The night before the wedding, she told me she thought her family was trying to sabotage the company. That they were plotting against her. It was delusional thinking. Sharon cross-examined him hard, got him to admit he'd never raised concerns about my mental health before the engagement ended, got him to admit his law firm was being paid substantial fees to represent my family. But the damage was done. Amanda testified about how I'd always been the odd one out in the family, how I'd isolated myself, rejected family gatherings, refused to participate in normal sibling relationships. She made it sound like I was a loner with social problems, not a person who'd been excluded and scapegoated her whole life. Sharon presented our side. She called me to the stand. I explained the business decisions rationally, explained the pattern of my family using company resources for personal gain, explained how the Maui trip was clearly planned to coincide with my wedding as psychological warfare. But I could see the judge wasn't fully convinced. The wedding day breakdown was too powerful. The immediate retaliation looked vindictive. No matter how I explained it, it looked bad. Sharon submitted the photos from Instagram, tried to show the timeline, proved the trip was deliberate sabotage. But my family's attorney, a slick man in his 40s from Tyler's firm, had explanations for everything. The trip had been planned since February. They'd invited Carla, but she'd declined. The Instagram post was just unfortunate timing, nothing malicious. The judge took a recess to consider. Sharon and I sat in the hallway of the courthouse, not speaking. I could feel everything slipping away. When we went back into the courtroom, Judge Morrison looked tired. "This is a difficult situation," he said. "I don't believe Miss Hartford is incapacitated or requires a full conservatorship. However, I am concerned about some of the decision-making patterns demonstrated here. Therefore, I'm issuing a temporary order." My heart sank. For the next 90 days, Miss Hartford will remain as CEO of Hartford Property Group. However, any major financial decision must be approved by a majority vote of the board of directors. This includes any expenditure over $10,000, any changes to corporate accounts or authorizations, and any modifications to ongoing projects. This order is temporary, pending a full evaluation. We'll reconvene in 90 days to reassess the situation. Sharon stood. "Your Honor, this effectively removes my client's authority as majority owner. It's a temporary safeguard, counsel. If Miss Hartford is as competent as you claim, she should have no trouble working with her board for 3 months." The gavel came down. Case closed. For now. I walked out of that courthouse knowing I'd lost. Oh, they'd let me keep my title, let me keep my CEO office. But my family had control now. They could outvote me on anything. They could block any decision I made. I'd been neutered. And it got worse. The case was public record. By that afternoon, it was on every local business news site. Hartford Property Group CEO deemed unfit. Court orders oversight. 2 major real estate investors pulled out of deals we'd been negotiating. They didn't want to work with a company whose CEO had been legally questioned. Our stock price dropped. Our reputation took a hit. My phone buzzed constantly with messages. Colleagues offering awkward sympathy. Competitors probably celebrating. Investors nervous about their money. I'd spent $40,000 on legal fees so far. I'd lost my authority in the company. My professional reputation was destroyed. And I still had 86 days until the next hearing, where they'd try to remove me permanently. I sat in my condo that night, staring at the river, wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. 2 weeks ago, I was about to get married, running a successful company, living my best life. Now I had nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. "I'm sorry it went this way. I still care about you. We should talk." I deleted the message and blocked his number. Some betrayals were unforgivable. 6 weeks passed in a special kind of hell. I was still CEO in name, still showed up to the office every day in my best suits, still sat at my grandfather's old desk and tried to do my job. But every decision I wanted to make got blocked by the board. Want to fire the incompetent project manager who was 2 months behind schedule? Board votes no. Want to pursue a new development opportunity in New Haven? Board votes no. Want to cut unnecessary expenses? Board votes no. Unless those expenses are the ones benefiting them, in which case they're suddenly essential. My father had reinstated all his perks within the first week. Corporate credit card, car lease, everything. Justin got his Range Rover back. Mom went back to shopping trips to New York on company money. And I couldn't stop any of it without board approval, which I would never get. It was like being a prisoner in my own company. The only power I still had was access to the financial records. Nobody had thought to restrict that. I was still CEO, still had login credentials to every system. And late at night, when I couldn't sleep because stress and anger kept me awake, I'd pull up those records and review them. That's how I found it. It was 2 a.m. on a Thursday when I noticed the first irregularity. A payment to a consulting company I didn't recognize, Davis Consulting LLC. $50,000 for development advisory services on the Riverside project, one of our new mixed-use buildings in Hartford. I'd never authorized that payment. I didn't recognize the company name. I pulled up the vendor registration. The LLC had been formed 6 months ago. The registered agent was a lawyer I didn't know, but the address listed was in West Hartford, the same zip code where my parents lived. My pulse quickened. I started searching for other payments to Davis Consulting. I found 6 more over the past 8 months. Small at first, 10,000 here, 15,000 there, then larger, 30,000, 50,000, 75,000, total. $260,000 paid to this company I'd never heard of. I dug deeper. Found another company. Riverside Management Services. $320,000 paid over the past year for property management consulting. Another LLC formed 8 months ago. Another West Hartford address. I searched for more. Found 4 different shell companies, all formed in the past 2 years, all receiving regular payments from Hartford Property Group, all with West Hartford addresses. I cross-referenced the payment authorizations. Every single one had been approved by my father as Chief Financial Officer, a position he'd held since grandfather died. But that wasn't all. I found inflated construction invoices. We'd paid $600,000 for concrete work on the Riverside project. I pulled up the original bid. It should have been $350,000. Someone had modified the contract, doubled the price. The construction company was owned by Justin's former college roommate. I found fake vendor invoices, payments to companies that didn't exist for services never rendered. I found kickback schemes where we'd buy materials at inflated prices, and someone somewhere was pocketing the difference. The more I looked, the worse it got. By 4 a.m, I'd traced approximately $3 million in fraudulent payments over the past 2 years. My father had been systematically embezzling from the company since grandfather died. Justin was in on it. Amanda's husband's company had been getting sweetheart contracts at inflated prices. They'd been stealing from me, from grandfather's legacy, from everything he'd built. And I understood now why they'd needed to get control. Why they'd needed to break me emotionally and legally. Because if they had full control of the company, they could cover this up forever. But with me as majority owner, constantly reviewing records, asking questions, it was only a matter of time before I found it. The wedding sabotage, the lawsuit, all of it had been designed to distract me, destabilize me, make me too emotional and overwhelmed to notice what they were doing. I sat there in my dark condo, my laptop screen the only light, staring at years of systematic theft, and I realized I was trapped. If I reported this to the police, my family would go to jail, but Hartford Property Group would be destroyed. The scandal would tank our reputation. Every investor would pull out. Every client would leave. The company grandfather built would collapse. Everything he'd worked for would be gone. If I didn't report it, I was complicit in fraud. And they would keep stealing, keep draining the company dry, until there was nothing left. Either way, I lost. The knock on my door at 8 a.m. startled me out of my exhausted daze. I'd been up all night, hadn't showered, was still in the yoga pants and t-shirt I'd worn the day before. I looked through the peephole. Tyler. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. I wanted to hear what he could possibly have to say to me after everything. He looked good. He always looked good. Expensive suit, perfect hair, sympathetic expression, carefully arranged on his handsome face. Carla, can I come in? I stepped aside. He walked in, looked around my condo with that appraising eye he had, probably calculating square footage and resale value. Lawyer brain never turned off. You look tired, he said. What do you want, Tyler? He sat on my couch without being invited, made himself comfortable. I want to help you. I still care about you, Carla. I know you don't believe that, but it's true. What happened between us doesn't change the fact that I want what's best for you. You testified against me in court. I told the truth about what I observed. That's not the same as being against you. He leaned forward, earnest and sincere. Look, I know this situation with your family is difficult, but it doesn't have to destroy your life. There's a solution here that benefits everyone. I'm listening. The lawsuit goes away. Your father drops everything. The conservatorship order gets lifted. You get your full authority back. Your reputation gets repaired. Everything goes back to normal. And what do they want in exchange? Marry me. I actually laughed. You're joking. I'm completely serious. We were good together, Carla. We can be good again. Your family likes me. They trust me. If you marry me, it shows you're stable, committed, making good decisions. The court case becomes moot. And what's the catch? He pulled out a folder from his briefcase. A postnuptial agreement. Just standard stuff. asset protection. In the event of divorce, we each keep what we brought to the marriage. But anything acquired during the marriage gets split 50-50. I took the folder, flipped through it, saw exactly what I expected. The postnuptial agreement would give Tyler half my shares in Hartford Property Group if we ever divorced. My 51% would become 25.5%. I'd lose majority control. So if I marry you, and then you divorce me, you get half my company. Only if you divorce me. If we have a good marriage, it's irrelevant. And if you divorce me? He smiled. I wouldn't do that. I love you, Carla. I looked at this man I'd almost married. This man who'd walked out on me the day of our wedding. This man who'd testified against me in court. This man who was now offering to save me in exchange for access to my inheritance. Get out. His smile faded. Carla, be reasonable. Get out of my home. Now. He stood, adjusted his suit jacket, picked up his briefcase. You're making a mistake. This is your best option. Your only option, really. Think about it. I don't need to think about it. We're done. We were always done. I just didn't see it until now. He walked to the door, paused. Your family is going to win, Carla. They have you cornered. You're going to lose everything. I'm offering you a way out. I'd rather lose everything than give it to you. He shook his head, looking at me with something like pity. Pride is expensive. You're about to learn just how expensive. Then he left, and I stood there holding a postnuptial agreement that would have signed away everything my grandfather gave me. I had 34 days until the final hearing. 34 days to figure out how to expose my family's fraud without destroying the company. 34 days to save everything or lose it all. The trap was closing, and I was running out of options. 3 weeks before the final hearing, the building collapsed. Not completely. Just a partial structural failure of the third floor of the Riverside project, the mixed-use development in downtown Hartford that was supposed to be our flagship property. The building wasn't finished yet, still under construction, but it was far enough along that we had workers on site every day. I was in my office when I got the call. Construction site emergency. Structural collapse. 2 workers injured. I drove to the site with my heart in my throat. Please don't let anyone be dead. Please, please, please. The scene was chaos. Ambulances, police cars, fire trucks. Workers standing around in hard hats looking shaken. Part of the third-floor concrete slab had given way, crashing down onto the second floor. 2 men had been caught in the collapse. One had a broken leg. The other had a crushed arm and possible internal injuries. Both were being loaded into ambulances as I arrived. The fire chief pulled me aside. We're shutting down the site pending investigation. OSHA will be here within the hour. Nobody works here until we figure out what happened. By the end of the day, we knew. The concrete was substandard. Didn't meet load-bearing specifications. Should have been 3,500 pounds per square inch. Tested at 2,200. The rebar placement was wrong. Too much spacing. Not enough support. The whole structure was compromised. OSHA launched a full investigation. Building inspectors swarmed the site. They found violations everywhere, not just the Riverside project. They started checking our other developments. Found the same problems. Substandard materials, cut corners, safety violations. And then they found the documentation. Purchase orders for the proper materials. Invoices showing we'd paid for the correct concrete, the right rebar, everything up to code. Except the materials delivered to the sites didn't match. Someone had substituted cheaper materials and pocketed the difference. The investigators wanted to know who approved these substitutions, who signed off on the material purchases, who authorized the payments. The trail led straight to me. My electronic signature on purchase orders I'd never seen. My authorization on payments I'd never approved. My name on safety inspections I'd never conducted. Someone had forged my digital signature on dozens of documents. I tried to explain. Showed them that I didn't have access to these systems, that I'd been locked out of major financial decisions by court order. But it didn't matter. I was CEO. My name was on everything. In the eyes of the law, the buck stopped with me. The workers who'd been injured filed lawsuits. Their attorneys held press conferences, showed pictures of the collapsed concrete, the twisted rebar, their clients in hospital beds. Hartford Property Group knowingly used substandard materials to cut costs, putting workers' lives at risk. CEO Carla Hartford personally approved these decisions, prioritizing profit over safety. Our insurance company refused to cover the claims. said the fraud exemption applied. If we deliberately used substandard materials, they weren't liable. The company was facing millions in lawsuits, fines from OSHA, criminal investigations, and all of it under my name. The media ran with it, every news station, every paper. CEO's cost-cutting decisions lead to construction disaster. My face on the news, walking into the office with cameras following. Reporters shouting questions. Did you know about the substandard materials? Why did you prioritize profit over safety? How do you respond to claims of criminal negligence? I couldn't respond. Sharon told me not to talk to the press, not to say anything that could be used against me in court. The final hearing was moved up. Emergency session. My family's attorney filed a motion for immediate removal as CEO. They argued I was not only mentally unfit but criminally negligent. They submitted all the forged documents as evidence. Look at what she approved. Look at what she signed off on. She's destroyed the company and endangered lives. I sat in Sharon's office 3 days before the hearing, looking at our options. We can prove the documents are forgeries, Sharon said. A digital forensics expert can show your signature was copied and pasted onto these purchase orders. But that takes time. Weeks, maybe months. And it's expensive. $20,000 just for the initial analysis. I'll pay it. Whatever it takes. Carla. She looked at me with something like pity. Even if we prove forgery, your family will claim you must have authorized someone else to sign on your behalf. You were CEO. You had ultimate authority. The burden of proof is on you to show you weren't negligent. So what do? Your family is offering a settlement. You sell them your shares for $2 million. Walk away. They take over the company. Deal with the lawsuits and investigations. You're free and clear. $2 million. My 51% stake was worth $15 million under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. The company was facing bankruptcy, criminal investigations, massive lawsuits. My reputation was destroyed. I might end up facing criminal charges for negligent endangerment. If I take the settlement, what happens to me? You sign a release. You're no longer an officer or shareholder. What happens to the company after that isn't your problem. You take the $2 million, start over somewhere else. Maybe change your name, move to a different state, build a new life. And if I fight, you could lose everything in bankruptcy. Spend everything you have on legal fees, possibly face criminal charges, at minimum, civil liability for the injuries. You could end up owing millions you don't have. I sat there in her perfectly appointed office, looking out at the Boston skyline, thinking about my grandfather. He'd built that company from nothing, worked until his hands bled, trusted me to protect it. And I'd lost it in less than 3 years. What would you do? I asked Sharon. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, honestly, I'd take the settlement. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've seen people destroy their entire lives fighting losing battles. Sometimes you have to know when to cut your losses. I thought about it, really thought about it. $2 million was still more money than most people would see in their lifetime. I could start over, go back to school, get another degree, work for someone else, build a different kind of life, let go of the company, the family, all of it. I could be free. No, I heard myself say. Sharon looked surprised. Carla, I really think you should reconsider. I need 2 weeks. Tell them I need 2 weeks to review the settlement terms before I sign. They want an answer now. The hearing is in 3 days. Tell them if they want me to go quietly, they give me 2 weeks. Otherwise, I fight. I drag this out for months, years if I have to. I make it as messy and public and painful as possible. Tell them that. Sharon looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was, but something in me couldn't just give up, couldn't just walk away and let them win after everything they'd done. I'll tell them, she said finally. But Carla, what are you planning to do in 2 weeks that you haven't done already? I don't know yet, but I'm not done fighting. I left her office and drove back to Hartford, stood in my condo looking out at the city I'd grown up in. The company my grandfather built was falling apart. My family had betrayed me at every turn. I'd lost my wedding, my fiancé, my reputation, my authority, everything. But I hadn't lost yet. Not completely. I still had those financial records. I still had evidence of the embezzlement. I still had 2 weeks. I opened my laptop and started working. I didn't sleep for 48 hours. Just coffee and determination and years of financial training guiding me through the maze of records I'd been collecting. I hired a forensic accountant with the last of my personal savings. His name was Marcus Chen, and he specialized in corporate fraud investigations. I sent him everything I'd found. The shell companies, the inflated invoices, the pattern of payments. Within 24 hours, he called me back. "This is extensive," he said. "Systematic embezzlement going back at least 2 years, maybe longer. Approximately $3 million that I can prove with documentation. Possibly more if we dig deeper. Can you testify to this in court?" "I can. But you need to understand something. If you go public with this, your family goes to prison. And the company reputation takes a massive hit. Every client, every investor will pull out. The business might not survive." "I know. But I need leverage. I also hired a private investigator. Former FBI agent who now ran his own firm. I had him track down the construction foreman from the Riverside project. The man was nervous, didn't want to talk. But when I showed him he might be facing criminal charges for the safety violations, he changed his mind. He told me everything. How my father had approached him 6 months ago, told him to use the cheaper concrete, the substandard rebar. Promised him an extra $50,000 in his pocket if he kept quiet. Showed him how to falsify the inspection reports. The foreman had text messages, emails, everything. "Why did you agree?" I asked him. "I got a sick wife. Cancer. Medical bills. Your dad knew that. He exploited it." The man looked ashamed. "I know it was wrong, but I needed the money. I had everything documented. Notarized statements, financial records, text messages, bank transfers. A complete picture of 2 years of systematic fraud. On day 13 of my 2 weeks, I called a mandatory board meeting. My father tried to refuse, said I didn't have authority to call meetings anymore. I reminded him I was still CEO, and still had that right, even under the court order. Sharon backed me up with a formal legal notice. The meeting was in the Hartford Property Group conference room on a Tuesday morning. My father, mother, Justin, and Amanda all showed up looking annoyed. They thought I was going to accept the settlement, thought I was finally broken. Sharon was with me. So was Marcus, the forensic accountant. My laptop was connected to the big screen on the wall. "Thank you for coming," I said. My voice was steady, calm. I'd practiced this. I wanted to review some financial irregularities I've discovered. My father stood up. "We don't have time for this. You called us here to accept the settlement or not. Which is it?" "Sit down, Dad." Something in my tone made him hesitate. Sharon pulled out a stack of documents and set them on the conference table with a heavy thunk. "What's this?" my mother asked. "Evidence," I said. I pulled up the first slide on the screen. Bank records showing transfers to Davis Consulting LLC. This company doesn't exist. It's a shell. The money goes to an account controlled by Richard Hartford. My father. Justin's face went pale. Amanda looked confused. My mother's eyes widened. "That's ridiculous," my father blustered. "That's a legitimate consulting company. We use them for development advisory." "Really? Can you name a single person who works for Davis Consulting? Can you show me a single report they've produced?" I clicked to the next slide. "Because I contacted the registered agent. The company has no employees, no office, no business operations. It exists solely to receive money from Hartford Property Group." I went through it all. Every shell company, every fake invoice, every inflated contract. Marcus backed me up with financial analysis, showing the money trail, proving the fraud. "Over $2.8 million stolen from this company in the past 2 years, I said. "Systematic embezzlement. Fraud. Money laundering." My father's face had gone from red to white. Justin looked like he might throw up. My mother was crying, but these weren't her fake court tears. These were real, terrified tears. "You have no proof I authorized any of this," my father said. I clicked to the next slide. Text messages between my father and Justin. "Use the Davis account for the kickback. Keep it under $50K per transaction." Email from my father to the construction foreman. "Use the cheaper concrete. Nobody will notice until after we sell the units." Bank transfers from my father's personal account to Amanda's husband's business account, labeled consulting fees but time-stamped right after inflated contracts were approved. "I have everything," I said quietly. "Every transaction, every communication, 2 years of evidence." The room was silent except for my mother's quiet crying. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to resign from the board, all of you, effective immediately. You're going to repay every penny you stole. I've calculated it at $2,837,000. You have 90 days. We don't have that kind of money, Justin said, his voice shaky. Sell your houses. Sell your cars. Liquidate your retirement accounts. I don't care. You stole it from the company. You're going to give it back. And if we don't? My father had found his voice again, trying to sound defiant. I nodded to Sharon. She opened her briefcase and pulled out another document. Then Miss Hartford files criminal charges with the FBI. Federal wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. You'll each face 10 to 20 years in federal prison. I stood up and walked to where my father Saturday, looked him in the eyes. But that's not all. I also have this. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. My father's voice, clear as day, from that morning's meeting. I'd been wearing a wire. I know using the substandard materials was wrong. I know it endangered people. But I needed the money. I had no choice. He'd said it right before I played the evidence. Right when he still thought he could bluff his way through. I'd recorded his confession. That's illegal, he sputtered. Connecticut is a two-party consent state. Actually, Sharon said smoothly, this is a place of business. Miss Hartford had every right to record board meetings for corporate purposes. That recording is completely admissible. My father looked at me with something between hatred and fear. You're destroying this family. No, Dad, you did that. I'm just cleaning up your mess. There was a knock on the conference room door. 3 FBI agents walked in. I'd contacted them that morning, given them everything. They'd agreed to be present for the confrontation. Richard Hartford, the lead agent said. Justin Hartford, you're under arrest for wire fraud and conspiracy to commit money laundering. They read them their rights. Put handcuffs on my father and brother right there in the conference room. My mother was sobbing. Amanda was in shock, just staring. Before they let him out, my father looked back at me. Your grandfather would be ashamed of you. No, I said. He'd be ashamed of you. He built this company with integrity. You tried to steal it with lies. They took him away. The FBI agents thanked me for my cooperation, told me they'd be in touch. Sharon started packing up her files. I turned to my mother and Amanda, still sitting at the conference table. You weren't directly involved in the embezzlement, I said, so I'm not pressing charges against you. You can keep your minority shares, but you're off the board permanently. You're banned from company property. If you fight me on this, I'll go after you for conspiracy and aiding and abetting. Do we understand each other? My mother nodded, still crying. Amanda just stared at me like she didn't know who I was. Good. You can go. They left without another word. I stood alone in the conference room, looking at the evidence spread across the table, feeling the weight of the past 3 months finally lifting. The next 6 months were hard. I had to stabilize the company, settle the workers' lawsuits fairly, implement new safety protocols and financial oversight. I brought in an entirely new board of directors, actual professionals with no family ties. I fired half the senior management and replaced them with people who valued integrity over shortcuts. My father and Justin took plea deals. 5 years in federal prison for Richard, 3 for Justin. The government seized their assets to pay restitution. They lost everything, just like they'd tried to make me lose everything. Tyler's law firm dropped him to avoid the scandal. His license was suspended by the Connecticut Bar Association for ethical violations. Last I heard, he was working for his father's insurance company in a non-legal role. The company survived. It took time and work and more stress than I'd thought possible, but Hartford Property Group came back stronger. We finished the Riverside project with proper materials and proper oversight. We launched 2 new developments with clean safety records. Revenue increased 23% in the first year after the arrests. I was sitting in my office 9 months after my failed wedding day when Julie came to visit. She brought champagne. What are we celebrating? I asked. You. Surviving. Winning. Being a complete legend. We sat in my grandfather's old office drinking champagne, and I showed her the photo I'd just framed for my desk. Me, Julie, and my 3 other close friends from college. The women who'd stood by me when everyone else abandoned me. My real family. Do you ever think about Tyler? Julie asked. Sometimes. Mostly I think about how lucky I was that he showed his true colors before I married him. Can you imagine if I'd actually gone through with it? You dodged a bullet. My phone buzzed. An email from my mother. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" I read the first line. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope someday we can reconcile. You're still my daughter. Can we meet for coffee? I thought about it for 3 seconds. Then I deleted the email and blocked her address. Everything okay? Julie asked. Everything's perfect. And it was. I'd lost my wedding, my family, almost lost my company and my freedom. But what I'd gained was worth so much more. I'd learned who I really was. I'd learned I was stronger than I'd ever known. I'd learned that doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything, is always worth it in the end. My grandfather had known what he was doing when he left me that company. He'd known I would protect it, even against my own family. He'd known I had the strength and integrity his own children lacked. I didn't just save Hartford Property Group. I saved myself. I learned that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the friends who show up when everyone else disappears. Sometimes it's the people you choose, not the ones you're born with. I started dating again eventually. Met someone through work, actually. An architect named Daniel who worked on one of our projects. He was kind, honest, passionate about his work. When I told him about my family drama over our third date, he said, "Wow, you're basically a superhero." We took it slow. No rushing, no pressure. Just two people building something real and genuine. 1 year after the wedding that never happened, I stood in my office on a Friday evening, looking out at the Hartford skyline. The company was thriving. I had a new relationship that felt healthy and real. I had friends who loved me. I had my self-respect and integrity intact. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Dinner tonight? I'm cooking." I smiled and typed back, "I'll bring the wine." As I packed up my laptop and headed for the elevator, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the fight, the victory. All of it had been necessary. All of it had been worth it. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of my life. You can't control what other people do. You can't make your family love you, or your partner stay loyal, or your opponents fight fair. But you can control how you respond. You can choose integrity over convenience. You can choose to fight for what's right, even when it's hard. And sometimes, when you're willing to risk everything for the truth, you end up gaining more than you ever imagined. I walked out of Hartford Property Group headquarters into the cool evening air, feeling lighter than I had in years. Free, strong, exactly where I was supposed to be. My grandfather would have been proud, and that was all that mattered. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between what's easy and what's right? Have you ever stood up to your family when they were wrong, even though it cost you everything? How did you find the strength to keep going when everyone around you told you to give up? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you hope or inspiration, or just reminded you that you're stronger than you think, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone in their fight. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope wherever you are in your own journey, whatever battles you're fighting, you remember that you're stronger than you know. That integrity matters, that the people who try to break you often end up revealing your true strength. Stay strong, keep fighting, and never, ever give up on yourself. Until next time.